Hi guys, welcome to the channel of love and the journey of ascension. The time is currently 11:11. We are reading Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone. Chapter 3. Clear the cobwebs from your thinking. You are what you think, but what do you think? How orderly are your thought processes? How straight is your thinking? And how clean are your thoughts? There are certain mental cobwebs that clutter up the thinking of almost everyone, even the most brilliant minds. Negative feelings, emotions, passions, habits, beliefs and prejudices. Our thoughts become entangled in these webs. Sometimes we have undesirable habits and we want to correct them. And there are times when we are strongly tempted to do wrong. Then, like an insect caught in a spider's web, we struggle to get free. Our conscious will is in conflict with our imagination and the will of our subconscious mind. The more we struggle, the more we become entrapped. Some persons give up and experience the mental conflicts of a living hell. Others learn how to tap and use the powers of the subconscious through the conscious mind. They are victorious. And success through a positive mental attitude teaches you how to tap and use these powers. An insect may not be able to avoid being caught in the spider's web, and when once trapped, it is unable to free itself. There is one thing, however, over which each person has absolute inherent control, and that is his mental attitude. We can avoid mental cobwebs, we can clear them, and we can sweep them away as they begin to develop. We can free ourselves when once enmeshed, and we can remain free. You do this by accurate thinking with PMA. Accurate thinking is one of the 17 success principles revealed in Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. To think accurately, you must use reason. The science of reasoning or accurate thinking is called logic. One can learn it from books written specifically on this subject, such as The Art of Clear Thinking by Rudolf Flesch, Your Most Enchanted Listener by Wendell Johnson, Introduction to Logic by Irvin Copey, and The Art of Straight Thinking by Edwin Leavitt Clark. These books can be of immense practical help. But we don't act from reason alone. And action based on common sense is the result of more than just reason. It depends upon habits of thought and action, intuitions, experiences, and other influences such as tendencies and environment. One of the cobwebs of our thinking is to assume that we act from reason alone, when in reality, every conscious act is the result of doing what we want to do. We make decisions. There is a tendency when reasoning to draw conclusions favourable to the strong inner urges of our subconscious mind, and this tendency exists in everyone, even the great thinkers and philosophers. In 31 BC, a great philosopher who lived in a city on the Aegean Sea wanted to go to Carthage. He was a teacher of logic. Therefore, he contemplated reasons in favour of making the voyage and reasons against it. For every reason as to why he should go, he found that there were many more reasons why he shouldn't. Of course, he would be seasick. The boat was so small that a storm might jeopardise his life. Pirates, with swift sailing vessels, were lying in wait off Tripoli to prey upon merchant vessels. If his ship were captured by them, they would take his worldly goods and sell him into slavery. Discretion indicated that he should not make the trip. But he did. Why? Because he wanted to. It so happens that emotion and reason should be in balance in everyone's life. Neither should always hold the controlling hand. So sometimes it is good to do what you want to do instead of what reason fears. As to this philosopher, he had a most pleasant journey and arrived back home safely. Then there was Socrates, the great Athenian philosopher who lived from 470 BC to 399 BC. He has gone down in history as one of the outstanding thinkers of all time. Wise as Socrates was, there were cobwebs in his thinking too. As a young man, Socrates fell in love with Xanthia. She was very beautiful. He wasn't good looking, but he was persuasive. Persuasive individuals seem to have the ability to get what they want. Socrates was successful in persuading Xanthia to marry him. Are you seeing only the mote in the other fella's eye? After the honeymoon was over, things didn't go along so well at his house. His wife began to see his faults, and he saw hers. He was motivated by egoism. He was selfish. She was always nagging him. Socrates reportedly said, "My aim in life is to get on well with people. I chose Xanthia because I knew if I could get on well with her, I could get along with everyone." That is what he said, but his actions disproved his words. It is questionable that he tried to get on well with more than a few. When you always try to prove to persons whom you meet that they are wrong, you repel rather than attract, as Socrates did. Yet he said that he endured Xanthia's nagging for his own personal self-discipline. But he would have developed real self-discipline had he tried to understand his wife and to influence her through the same considerate attentions and expressions of love that he used in persuading her to marry him. He didn't see the beam in his own eye, but he saw the mote in Xanthia's eye. Of course, Xanthia wasn't blameless either. Socrates and she were just like many husbands and wives living today. After their marriage, they neglect to continue to communicate their true feelings of affection, understanding, and love to each other. They neglect to continue to employ the same pleasing personalities and mental attitudes that made their courtship such a happy experience. Negligence is a cobweb too. Now, Socrates didn't read success through a positive mental attitude, neither did Xanthia. Had she done so, she would have known how to motivate her husband so that their home life would have been a happier one. She would have seen the beam in her eye, rather than the mote in Socrates. she would have controlled her own reactions and been sensitive to the reactions of her husband. In fact, she might have even proved the fallacy of his logic after she read chapter 5, entitled "And Something More." And because the story of Socrates proves he saw only the mote in Xanthithe's eye, we shall tell you about another young man. He learned to see the beam in his own eye, but before we do, let's see how the habit of nagging develops. You see, when you know the cause of a problem, you can often avoid it, or you can find your own solution to that problem if you already have it. S.I. Hayakawa, in Language in Thought and Action, wrote, in order to cure what she believes to be her husband's faults, a wife may nag him. His faults get worse, so she nags him some more. Naturally, his faults get worse still, and she nags him even more. Governed by a fixative reaction to the problem of her husband's faults, she can meet it only one way. The longer she continues, the worse it gets, until they are both nervous wrecks, their marriage is destroyed, and their lives are shattered. Now, what about the young man? It was the first evening of a PMA Science of Success class when he was asked, "Why are you taking this course?" "Because of my wife," he responded. Many of the students laughed, but not the instructor. He knew from experience that there are many unhappy homes when husband or wife sees the other's faults, but not his or her own. He restored happiness to his home. It was 4 weeks later, in a private conference, that the instructor asked the student, "How are you coming along with your problem?" "It's solved." "That's wonderful, but how did you solve it?" "I learned when I am faced with a problem that involves misunderstandings with other persons, I must first start with myself. When I examined my own mental attitude, I discovered that it was negative. My problem was really not with my wife after all, it was with me. In solving my problem, I found that I no longer had one with her." Now, what if Socrates had said to himself, "When I am faced with a problem that involves a misunderstanding with Xanthithe, I must first start with myself"? And what would happen if you would say to yourself, "When I am faced with a problem that involves a misunderstanding with another person, I must first start with myself"? Would your life be a happier one? But there are many other cobwebs that interfere with happiness. Oddly enough, the one that is the greatest hindrance is the very tool of thought itself: words. Words are symbols, as S.I. Hayakawa tells us in his book, and you will find that a one-word symbol can mean to you the sum total of a combination of innumerable ideas, concepts, and experiences. And you will also see, as you continue to read Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, that the subconscious instantaneously communicates the conscious mind through symbols. Through one word, you can motivate others to act. When you say to another person, "You can," this is suggestion. When you say to yourself, "I can," you motivate yourself by self-suggestion. But more about these universal truths in the next chapter. First, let's recognise that a whole science has grown up around the important discoveries made without words, and the communicating of ideas through words, the science of semantics. And Hayakawa is an expert in this field. He tells us that to find out what a word really means on the lips of another person, or even on your own lips, is essential to the process of accurate thinking. But how does one do this? Just be specific. Start with a meeting of the minds, and many needless misunderstandings will be avoided. One word can cause an argument. The uncle of a 9-year-old boy was visiting in the home of the boy's parents. One evening, when the father came home, the following dialogue developed. "What do you think of a boy that lies?" "I don't think very much of him, and I know one thing certain. My son tells the truth. He told a lie today." "Son, did you tell your uncle a lie?" "No, father." "Let's clear this thing up. Your uncle says you lied. You say you didn't. Just exactly what did happen?" he asked, turning to the uncle. "Well, I told him to take his toys down to the basement. He didn't do it, and he told me that he did." "Son, did you take your toys to the basement?" "Yes, father." "Son, how do you explain this? Your uncle says that you didn't take your toys to the basement, and you say that you did." "There are several steps leading from the first floor down to the basement. About 4 steps down is a window. I put my toys on the windowsill. The basement is the distance between the floor and the ceiling. My toys are in the basement." The argument between the uncle and his nephew was due to the definition of one word, basement. The boy probably knew what his uncle meant, but he was lazy and hadn't wanted to run all the way downstairs. When he was faced with punishment, the boy tried to save himself by using logic to prove his point. Now, this may be intriguing, but more motivating will be the story of a young man who didn't know what the most important word symbol in any language means. And what is the most important word in any language? That word is God. Not so long ago, a student from Columbia University called on the Reverend Harry Emerson Fosdick, Minister Emeritus of the Riverside Church of New York City. The student had hardly gotten through the door before he said, "I am an atheist." When he sat down, he repeated defiantly, "I don't believe in God." Let's start with a meeting of the minds. Now, fortunately, Dr. Fosdick was also an expert in the field of semantics. He knew from long experience that he could never really communicate with another person unless he understood exactly what that other person meant by the words he used. He also knew that it was necessary for the other person to comprehend his meaning. So instead of taking offence at the student's brash remark, Dr. Fosdick expressed a genuinely friendly interest in him and then asked, "Please describe to me the God you do not believe in." The young man had to think, as everyone has to think when he is asked a question that doesn't cause a reflex yes or no answer. Dr. Fosdick knew that the right question could sweep strong cobwebs of negative thinking out of the youth's mind. After a little while, the student began to try to describe the God he didn't believe in. In so doing, he gave the minister a very clear picture of the God he rejected. "Well," said Dr. Fosdick, when the student had finished, "if that is the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in him either. So we are both atheists. Nevertheless," he continued, "we still have the universe in our hands. What do you make of it? Its formation, its meaning? Before the young man left, Dr. Fosdick had discovered that he was not an atheist at all, but a very good theist. He did believe in God. Now, Dr. Fosdick had not been thrown by the undefined use of a word. In this instance, he helped sweep away the cobwebs of the young man's thinking by asking him questions. The simple, clear response as to what the young man didn't believe in was enough to allow a meeting of the minds. The second question directed the youth's thoughts into the proper channels, and it gave Dr. Fosdick an opportunity to explain his meaning of the universal God. Frog Legs taught him logic. As we have seen, the student reached two entirely different conclusions. Each were based on a different premise. Cobwebs will interfere with accurate thinking and cause you to reach a wrong conclusion when you start with a false premise. W. Clement Stone had an amusing experience with this, which he describes as follows. As a young boy, I enjoyed eating frog legs. One day at a restaurant, I was served jumbo frog legs and didn't like them. Then and there, I decided that I didn't like large frog legs. Some years later, I was at a quality restaurant in Louisville, Kentucky, and saw frog legs on the menu. My conversation with the waiter was as follows. Are these small frog legs? Yes, sir. Are you sure? I don't like the large ones. Yes, sir. If they're the small ones, that'll be fine for me. Yes, sir. When the waiter brought the entree, I saw that they were jumbo frog legs. I was irritated and said, "These aren't the small frog legs." "These are the smallest we could find, sir," the waiter responded. Rather than be unpleasant, I ate the frog legs, and I enjoyed them so much that I wished they had been larger. I learned a lesson in logic. In analysing the matter, I realised that my conclusions about the merits of large and small frog legs had been based on the wrong premise. It wasn't the size of the frog legs that made them distasteful. It was the fact that the jumbo frog legs I had eaten the first time hadn't been fresh. I had associated my distaste for jumbo frog legs with size rather than with spoilage. Now we see that cobwebs prevent accurate thinking when we start with the wrong premise. So many persons think inaccurately when they allow all-embracing word symbols to clutter up their minds with false premises. Such words or expressions as always, only, never, nothing, every, everyone, no one, can't, impossible, either, or are most frequently false premises. Consequently, when they are so used, their logical conclusions are false. I think we shall leave the reading there. Page number 48. Okay, guys, I will talk to you soon. Until then, take care, much love. Bye for now.